Hey, my name is Samar. I also go by Sam or First Time Panner. Any of those you want to call me, you can. This will be an update for my No Pan Left Behind series, which I will leave linked in my description box and at the end of the video. But just in case you haven't seen this before, I just wanted to do this. No Pan Left Behind is like a very well-known concept, but I want to challenge myself to use every single pan of eyeshadow from like all of my eyeshadow palettes in the year of 2024. So I grouped my palettes into like small, medium, and large, and I like kind of shuffled them around throughout the year and kind of by season as well, so the color stories would really fit the seasons. But I gave myself 4 to 5 palettes a month that I wanted to use No Pan Left Behind style, and I said that I only had the calendar month to complete them and it wouldn't be rolling. So if I just didn't get to a palette, then too bad. I didn't meet my goal for that month. But every month so far, I have actually met my goal, even with all the other eyeshadow projects I've been doing. So I'm really excited. And I have also met my goal for October. I'm filming this on October 31st. So my orange makeup is pretty fitting. But I did get my last uses on the palettes that I still needed to use with this look. So yeah, I've used every pan in these palettes at least once and I'm really excited. So I'll get into a recap on the palettes that I rolled in last time, and then I'll roll in 5 new palettes for November. So for October, I only had 4 palettes because October had the largest palette in my entire collection. Sorry, this is kind of reflective. But of course, this is the Metropolis palette, which has 28 shades. Not gonna lie, it could have had 25 shades and the color story would have been literally the exact same, because there are 3 just exact dupe shades in this palette, which was very annoying, especially because if you're trying to use it No Pan Left Behind, you don't want to be repeating the exact same look over and over again. So if you look inside this palette, it actually has a flap of all the shade names. So I don't know if you can tell, this thing is very annoying. I'm probably gonna rip it out after this, but if you can tell, I marked in that pink Sharpie every time I used a shade, and as you can see, every shade has been marked off. And I just dug my finger into that brown. It's a cream to powder too, so it actually made an imprint in there. Oops. So I'll be posting the looks that I did with this palette on the screen. By the way, I usually try to do as much as I can looks exclusively with just one palette for this project, because it makes like showcasing the looks easier. But I kind of wanted to mix and match everything, especially because I had such a large range of shades to use this month that I kind of just mixing and matching palettes. So I will have a lot of these looks in for like when I showcase multiple palettes. If you see the same look twice, that's why. So other than the fact that this palette has a lot of dupes, which I think everyone by now knows, the things that kind of bothered me about this was the fact that for my skin tone, and I don't even have a very light skin tone, for my skin tone there's only one inner corner shade, and of course like this isn't going to go with all looks. This is kind of like a white gold shade, so like you can't use it with everything. It's not a universal inner corner. I mean, technically you could, but I really like to coordinate my looks down to the exact undertone. And because this is No Pan Left Behind, I really didn't, even though like this is kind of neurotic, I didn't really want to use the same shade twice because I felt like that would hinder my progress on things. So I just used this once, I think in like one of my very first looks with this palette, and then I had to look elsewhere for inner corner shades. So that is another con for this palette. And then also this shade right here, it is a beautiful like duochrome kind of ethereal topper shade. But this one right here, I've been wiggling this finger, but this one, it is so pretty. But for me, I couldn't really find anything in this palette that it went with. I eventually just used it when I used these 2 shades together. I just layered it on top of this shade here because this shade is like, this is like, I'm being very nitpicky about this palette, but this shade is like the only cool brown in this palette, and this is the only cool like taupey metallic type shade, like cool neutral metallic. So I paired these 2 and they just did not go well together, so I put this on top and it kind of just made the look, I don't know, it just kind of looked like I threw 3 shades on my eye. randomly, which is kind of what happened. So I feel like for 28 shades, this palette could have been done a lot better, taken out all the dupe shades and then also put in extra shades that could have made these other shades in this palette a lot more meaningful. But I eventually was able to get through this and I'm very proud of that. Next I'll talk about this little Kaja bento. Probably should have talked about this first because it was the first palette I used. It's literally just a trio, only has 3 shades. I'll swatch it. Here are the 3 shades in this palette. I ended up using it twice actually because I took this out of town with me for what was supposed to be an overnight trip. It ended up being, or I ended up being gone for the entire weekend, but this was pretty perfect to have because it just fit really easily in my makeup bag and I enjoyed using it. This was the first time I used it and I was pretty happy with the look that I got out of it just for something really quick while I was out of town. But of course, just like with all these Kaja bentos, because they're literally only 3 shades, and especially for this one because this first one is kind of just like an eyeshadow primer setting shade for my skin tone, I am very limited with this, so that's probably the purpose this will serve for the entire time going forward, is just if I'm going out of town really quickly and I'm doing warm tone makeup. Next is the monthly dose of colors portion of the video, and that is the Sassy Siennas palette. And this was really nice again as a companion palette. I didn't do any looks exclusively with this because, as I say, pretty much like almost every time I've had one of these 5-pan monochromatic matte palettes from Dose of Colors, I usually don't do only matte looks, and not because I don't like matte looks, but just because I have so many shades I'm trying to use at all times. I'm always putting a shimmer on my lid pretty much, so I never did a look exclusively with this palette, but I did really enjoy this as a companion palette. Of course, I was wearing a lot of oranges, and unfortunately most of the shades in here did turn out looking just orange on my skin tone and not really different variations of like warm browns or sienna. So I do feel like this palette, as far as at least the name of the palette, is a little bit of a flop because for me it's just an orange palette. The only shade that would have been different is this one right here, and this is actually one that I wanted to talk about. It was getting a little bright for me. I just turned down the brightness on my ring light, but this shade is the first time this ever happened to me from a Dose of Colors palette ever. But this shade, this dark brown one, was very patchy on me. I was so disappointed because I had really liked the look that I did, and then I thought maybe I'll just put this in the outer corner just to deepen it up a little bit, and then it just kind of bit me in the butt because I had this like dark brown patch of eyeshadow on both eyes. It happened on both eyes, so I know it wasn't just like a user error the first time I used it. And it just looked like this splotchy dark patch of eyeshadow on each outer corner, and yeah, I'm really disappointed because this is the only deep shade in this entire palette. This is the only non-orange shade in this entire palette. So I really feel like maybe down the road, not now, but maybe down the road, I could potentially declutter this because this just isn't offering enough for me. And I honestly don't see the need for it if it's just going to be more oranges and then a shade that doesn't work for me. Finally, for October, I had my ColourPop Lucky Penny palette, and as always, I did say in my last update this was the month that I was going to try to finish all of my orange palettes, and this is yet another orange palette. Pretty much every shade in here except for this dark brown is orange, and I mean that very literally. All of these turn out orange on my skin. Different shades of orange, especially the metallics. I feel like the metallics actually varied more than the mattes, which is interesting because I feel like when I look at these, the mattes look more different than the metallics, but they all just ended up looking orange on my eyes. So yeah, I've discovered that a lot of my oranges that I think, or a lot of my eyeshadows that I think are browns like warm browns just end up being orange on me. Of course, with this palette, I did know that a lot of it was going to be orange, which is why I put it in for October. And this is actually one of the palettes that I'm wearing on my eyes today. I'm very happy that I got use out of this palette because I do actually have pan in this shade Hit It Big because it was in another project to hit pan. But other than that, I think I had only used like 1 or 2 other shades from this palette, and then I had never used anything else. And I've had this palette for over 2 years now, so it was time I got use on it. Yeah, I really don't have much else to say other than I just did a lot of orange eyeshadow this month and I'm kind of ready to be done with it, which thankfully none of my eyeshadows for the rest of the year have orange in them. And the palettes that I've chosen for November are these 5 right here. So I actually do have 2 Pat McGrath palettes in this month, and I'll talk about these first. So the first one that I want to talk about is my Bronze Ambition. This is the 6-pan like warm brown eyeshadow palette. I just realized now I actually have 2 of the exact same shade in here because one shade is repeated in this one right here. This palette is a little bit special to me because ever since I've had it, just because of the color story, literally, this has happened to be the palette that I've used every single Thanksgiving. So this will, because I'm probably going to repeat the tradition this year, this will be the 3rd year that I'm wearing this palette on Thanksgiving. I feel like all of these shades just kind of embody what Thanksgiving feels like as far as the color stories. Like you have the pumpkin pie, you have the turkey, you have the yams. If you're not American, I'm sorry, this probably makes no sense to you. I just love the color story of this palette, especially when I bought this maybe 2 years ago now. These were like the tones I was into. Oh, actually we do have like kind of an orangey shade here, so I might not have been as thorough as I should have been when I was looking at these palettes, but I'll be happy to use it. But yeah, I'm just really excited to use this palette. Also, Pat McGrath has my favorite, this is kind of specific, but she has my favorite neutral matte formula. I feel like her neutral mattes are just, especially like, okay, this shade, when I use this shade, it's like it just melts into my skin. Like for me, her formula is the level of quality that I feel like everyone else says Natasha Denona's quality is. Like for me, there's no other neutral mattes that I would rather put on my eyes than this one. It's just the best of the best. Then a slightly similar palette to that one is her, what is this called? The Eye Ecstasy Sublime palette, which looks like this. It's just a little 5-pan palette. This shade right here is actually the same dark brown as the one in here. It's this shade right here. They're both illicit, and this is what the palette looks like swatched in my hand. I love this so much. I actually have big plans for this quint next year, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I'm just gonna use everything once, and I'm just really excited because I love this little quint so much. I'm so happy I bought this before it was discontinued, and I have not used it even once this entire year, and I think I barely used it last year either. So for how much I love this, like I barely use it, and I just want to kind of like reacquaint myself with this palette. I think it's lovely and I'm really excited to use it. Of course, there's another quint in this group, which is, it has to be another Dose of Colors palette, and that's the Golden Hour palette, which is another one that I've never used. It's just a really simple warm brown color story, and I'm like 100% sure I will be able to use this entire thing in one look. So I'm really excited for that. I'm excited to try it. Next we have the 2 slightly larger palettes. These are like, this one only has 12 pans in it, so nowhere near compared to the Metropolis palette, but this one is the biggest palette in this rotation. This is the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Divine Neutrals palette, and I really do like this palette. I think, you know, we all know Jaclyn Hill is very, very controversial. Also, Morphe is a tad bit controversial, just depending on who you ask. But I feel like the Morphe and Jaclyn Hill collabs, they were always the best hits. Like, she knows how to make a great color story. She always had the best formulas, I feel like, out of all of the Morphe palettes, and I really do like this palette. The only thing I will say is, just like with a lot of Morphe metallics, these do get hard pan pretty much after every use, so I do need to go in with some tape and kind of clear the tops of these. But other than that, I absolutely love the shades in this palette. I love combining them, especially the metallics. They look so beautiful combined with each other. Like, I don't know if she meant to do that when she was curating this color story, but they work so amazingly together and the mattes just blend out really well, so I'm very excited to use this. Then finally, a 10 pan palette, which is the Melt Cosmetics Gemini palette. I just got this last year and I have used all the shades, but ever since it rolled out of that project it was in, I haven't used it. So I'm excited to get back into this. We have like a warm neutral side and then a green side, and then of course we have this black here, which is actually a really good black. I will say this shade right here, which is supposed to be a duochrome, whenever I put it on my skin, it's not a duochrome. I don't know if that has to do with my skin tone, or if that's just what happened to it in general, but just wanted to note that it does not look like a duochrome on me, but I still really like the shade. And that is everything for this update. So thank you so much for everyone's support. Like, every time I do an update, everyone's just cheering me on in the comments, and I even had DW comment like, oh, you're doing so well, you like always hit your goal. And I was like, I really don't think I'm gonna do it for October because we were already like 2/3 of the way into the month and I hadn't even used like half of the shades in my October palette rotation yet. So I feel like I really like, what motivates me the most for this project is everyone who watches and comments. So thank you so much for continuing to support this video series. I really appreciate it, and I'm just like really loving doing this and getting use on all of my palettes and actually using the things that I buy. So it's been really fun and I can't wait for next update. But until then, good luck on all of your projects and all of your eyeshadow palettes. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.